I was born this way. I have neither of my legs nor my left arm. As far as disability when it comes to education, I've been from the get-go. My parents ensured that I was within a regular classroom. I grew up in the 70s, and so in the 70s, inclusion was not a word that was used very often. So they did have to fight for me to be able to stay in a regular classroom. They, of course, wanted to put me in, or others wanted to put me in special ed. My parents convinced them that just because I couldn't walk or run didn't mean I couldn't read or write or participate in a regular education. So I think my education story started with my parents fighting for me, which is to this day something that I will be forever grateful for.
I started as a high school history teacher in Tunica, Mississippi in the late 1990s, and being in a classroom at the very beginning of my career was a formative experience, and working with students with all levels of abilities, disabilities, backgrounds, really crystallized for me the need to prepare educators to meet the needs of each individual student, regardless of their ability level.
I was diagnosed with dyslexia when I was a first grader, and that's right when 94-142, the law before the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is what we call it now, IDEA. But 94-142 was the original special education law, and it was coming into play in 1976, and that's when I was diagnosed. And so I was very lucky that I received supports and services from a forward-thinking district. And my family and the district all respected each other, and they worked well together. And so I received the services that I needed. I was exiting special education by the time I was a sixth grader, and then did well throughout high school and college, even though the original prognosis was don't try to send her to college. She won't be able to do it.
I'd always known I wanted to be a teacher since I was a little girl. When I was in middle school, I actually began in a PE class with students with disabilities, and I took on like a leadership role there, and I really helped them in their PE class, and it kind of showed me my passion for working with students with disabilities. I also have experience. I am a respite provider for students with disabilities, so I help them work on their goals and anything that they need help with around the house. And then I also did an internship last year, my senior year of high school, with a special education classroom. So then it kind of really showed me that I do want to do this, and I came to Drake knowing I wanted to do special ed.
I'm a glass half full kind of person. So, obviously there are so many things that have changed since I've been through school. There's inclusion is a very strong word right now. The co-teaching is so important. To have students in the classroom, I think is working.
The system has been a lot better than it used to be, and they're working on creating this environment for students to be in the classroom as much as they can with the general ed students, as well as being in the special education classroom if they need it.
The IDEA is the Individuals Disabilities Education Act. And so that law, it's had a few names in the past, but that's what it goes by now. And that essentially says that kids with disabilities have the right to a free and appropriate public education. We use acronym FAPE for that. Special education law is the land of acronyms.
The IEDA is that the passage of that was a watershed moment in disability policy, and so I think that has made a tremendous difference for providing important and necessary accommodations to students who need them.
So an IEP is an individualized education program or plan. And that is the document that essentially says this is how we're going to educate this kid in school. And so an IEP will have goals.
The procedural safeguards and the way that families are engaged in helping design a unique plan for a singular person around their needs that is unique to IDEA and unique to special education.
The ADA is focused more on those kind of accommodations, physical accommodations, modifications to policies that the school may have.
A 504 plan is more of a systemic plan. It's about life limitations. You have to have a specific diagnosis.
504 plan doesn't necessarily look at curriculum and adjustments to curriculum. It'll look at those more modifications to policies.
Oftentimes, when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, ability or disability is often overlooked in that. And so, while not necessarily intentionally harmful, I'm always called to remember when we think about those things like equity and inclusion, are we fully considering the diverse needs of learners and those who have disabilities or different abilities, and how do we create accommodations that enable and empower them to be successful?
Well, the state of education and accessibility across the nation needs to be better than it is. And I think each state, Iowa included, have things that they're better at and things that they could improve upon. No state and special education as a whole isn't fully funded. We know in the corporate world or in the private world, if you don't have enough to pay for it, then you can't have it. But in the public world, if you don't have enough to pay for it, they still have to provide it. Not enough money to provide high quality education across the board, and certainly not for kids with disabilities, whether it be 504 or special education. And that makes it hard to be really up to par with what you should be.
I think attitudes is always going to be that big stopping point for a lot of students, a lot of teachers. Teachers that don't want to put in the extra work, that they don't want to, oh, if I have to take care of him, then that means that the other 24 students won't be taken care of. Or if I have to, provide accommodations for her, then I have to provide them for everybody. So attitudes about certain aspects of education, I think, is probably the biggest detriment.
Incorporating that inclusion is a really big part of just like the school-wide system of, instead of thinking of these students as different people, they're just like anyone else, and they're also your classmates as well. And I think it's also important for students to see them in the hallways and say hi, and to not just look at them as people who are different than them.
So essentially the voucher bill, as it impacts kids with disabilities who are in public schools, the law doesn't make a lot of changes. Obviously, there are funding concerns on the policy side of things, but as far as what your rights are, if your kid has a disability and attends a public school, nothing there is really changing. What changes is that the IDEA on the federal level does not apply to non-public schools. They're expressly exempted in the federal law.
As voucher programs become something that is more common in the state, it's going to impact who can get into those and who can't. So if you have good voucher programs and everybody wants to get into that program, kids with disabilities cost more. And so they may or may not be able to get into that program. Also, at any time, that school can say, nope, you're out of here.
Private schools are not providing these services. They're going to have to improve because they're going to be watched more be more scrutinized over this type of stuff. Public schools are being more scrutinized because of the things that maybe have gone wrong, which is forcing, making parents make those choices to go to a private school. So I think it could be a win-win depending on how it is all hashed out.
That can get really complicated when you have one entity who has no obligation to provide it and another entity that does have an obligation.
It's not really going to be the fix for families who have kids with disabilities that we might think that it would be, unless we are designing a school around a particular disability or set of characteristics of a disability, and we have a way to supplement the funding.
Like I said, we've come so far in where we're going. In education with students with disabilities, we have a ways to go. Every year that I'm here, I see improvements. Every year I'm here, I see students asking for and receiving what they need, having those advocacy skills, having those needs met.
I hope that this continues to be a focus of policymakers. Our state legislature has turned attention to these issues in recent years, but there's clearly more work to be done as well.
Every education student has to take Intro to Special Ed, and I think that class is really important for them to take, but it's only one semester, and I think there's a lot more that general education teachers can learn, because I've learned a lot outside of that class, and I haven't even taken other SPED classes yet. So I think maybe in addition to that class and kind of like more talking of implementing the students within the gen ed classroom is really important. So just a little more extension of that would be my suggestion.
I spoke with a member of the class of 1973, so just before IEDA, and she majored in special education. And so it was fascinating to hear from her, and just the terminology that they use to label the programs would not even be appropriate anymore, right? And so just thinking about how much our approach has changed since then.
My son's a fifth grade teacher. He also shared with me some of the mental health issues that are going on. And, he's got fifth graders, and some of the things that fifth graders are dealing with. He's like, Mom, I don't understand how to deal with students in this because I've never been trained. So I do think there just needs to be more training, and then there needs to be more teachers. There just needs to be more teachers.
Everyone, even if you don't experience disability in your own life, most likely everyone's going to come around someone who does have a disability, even if it's visible or not. So I think it's a really important part to talk about, especially within the education system.